In this video, we're going to go through Explain 1, and we're going to talk about the different types of sampling techniques. So the explorer showed that the simple random samples are likely representative of a population, as are other sampling methods that involve randomness, and therefore preferred over sampling methods that don't involve randomness. So randomness is a good thing. Identify the population and classify the sampling method, and decide whether the sampling methods could result in a biased sample. Explain your reasoning. So the goal of a sampling is to obtain a representative sample, because the statistic obtained from the sample is a good estimator of corresponding population parameter. Some sampling methods result in biased samples that may not be representative of the population and can produce statistics that lead to inaccurate conclusions about the corresponding population parameters. A simple random, each individual in a population has an equal chance of being selected. Self-selected, individuals volunteer to be part of the sample. Convenience, individuals are selected based on how accessible they are. Systematic, members of the sample are chosen according to a rule, such as every nth individual in the population. Stratified, the population is divided into groups, and individuals from each group are selected, typically through a simple random within each group. Cluster, population, sorry, my alarm's going off, I gotta shut it off. Cluster, the population is divided into groups. Some of the groups are randomly selected, and either all of the individuals in the selected groups are selected, or just some of the individuals from the selected groups are selected, typically through a random sample within each selected group. So the officials of the NFL Football League want to know how the players feel about some of the proposed changes to the NFL rules. They decide to ask a sample of 100 players. The officials choose the first 100 players who volunteer their opinions. Well, if they're choosing the first 100 players that volunteer their opinions, that is self-selected. Now, I'm not going to write quite as many sentences as the book does. We're supposed to tell whether this is biased or not. Well, that's definitely biased because they self-selected in, right? The players chose to answer. They didn't have to. So the officials randomly choose 3 or 4 players from each of the 32 teams of the NFL. So in this one here, because these stratified and cluster are hard to tell apart. Populations divided into groups, so they're divided into the teams, and then each group are individuals from each group are selected at random, and then it says randomly chosen, so this one has to be the stratified. And then is this bias or not? And because there's some randomness to it, this is not bias, so not bias because randomly chosen in each team. The officials have computer randomly generated list of 100 players from the database of all NFL players. So again, this one would totally be a simple random. And simple random is never biased. So, well, I take that back. It's usually not biased. Not biased. Because players chosen randomly. Administrators at your school want to know if the students think that more vegetarian items should be added to the lunch menu. The administrators survey every 25th student who enters the cafeteria during lunch period. Well, that's very, very systematic. I'm going to spell it wrong. Okay. The problem is that you're only getting the kids that are in line for the cafeteria. You're not getting any kids that maybe brought their own lunch or aren't eating lunch. So I would say that this I'm sorry, every 25th student who enters the cafeteria. It isn't biased. We're not going to do the convenience one. So So this isn't biased because you have a system in place and you're gonna survey. You'll end up surveying a wide range of students. The administrators survey the first 50 students who get in the lunch line, so that's definitely convenience, which I never spell right. And then this one, it's because since the students are easily accessible, that's why it's convenience. And then the problem is that this one, they're the ones who, just because they entered the cafeteria in this one doesn't mean they have to be getting lunch. Here, we know that they're already in line to buy lunch, so it leaves out, so it's biased because it leaves out anyone who doesn't eat lunch or doesn't bring lunch. All right, the administrators use a randomly generated list of 50 students from a master list of all students. That one is definitely simple random. And that one would be not biased because students chosen randomly. All right, identify the population, classify sampling methods, decide whether the sampling methods could result in a biased sample, explain your reasoning. All right, so a local newspaper conducts a survey to find out if an adult residents in the city think that the use of handheld cell phones while driving in the city should be banned. The newspaper sends a text message to a random selection of 1,000 subscribers whose cell phones are listed in the paper subscription database. So obviously that's a simple random. However, this time in this particular case, they're only surveying people who actually have cell phones. So in this case, it's probably a little bit biased because these people already use cell phones. So they be more likely to maybe answer that they should be able to use them while driving. So I would say that it's biased because they only surveyed those who had cell phones. And then using the 10 neighborhoods into which the city is divided, the newspaper randomly contacts 100 adults living in each of the neighborhoods. So in this case, again, it's a group, right? They divided it into groups, and then they randomly selected individuals from the group. So again, this one is stratified. And then again, I would think that this one would be not biased because a wide range of residents is surveyed, or because they randomly selected within each group.